Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Particle Accelerator Podcast. I'm here today with Raghu Bala. Raghu, would you introduce yourself, please?
I'm Raghu Bala. I'm based in Southern California. I'm the CEO and founder of Synergetics.ai.
Awesome. I'm excited to get into what Synergetics does and what's going on, but I'd love to get to know you better. How did you make your first dollar as a human being? For me, as a kid, I had a paper route, I did food service. What was your humble beginnings? How'd you make your first dollar?
I'm originally from Singapore. And in Singapore, we have draft military. And that's how I made my first dollar. Working in the army, I didn't have a job before that. I was a student and so on.
Is there a toy or hobby that you had as a kid that influenced what you do career-wise today?
I had my first Apple II when I was, I think, 12 or 13. So that got me started. And I've never moved away from the field of computers ever since. You can say that was a sort of a semi-toy. I used to play a lot of games, but I also used to code even as a kid. That interest and passion has stayed all these years.
I remember in elementary school, they set us down in front of Apple IIs. I don't know if you ever used this program, Logos. It was a little triangle. The triangle had a pen, and you could program how that triangle wrote a line. My first introduction to programming was on an Apple II in the computer lab at school. First, it was forward. You had to write the whole thing forward. Then they showed you abbreviations. I thought abbreviations were really cool. So you would do FD90, RT90, and you did that 4 times and you drew a square. Then they showed you a repeat function, and you could do repeat brackets, the little instruction, and then 4. Now I can repeat things. And then you had commands like pen up, pen down. So you could do really intricate spirograms and have holes in the middle and all kinds of things. It was really cool. Apple II, Logos programming. It was a fun time back then.
That day I was watching a TV show. It was an older show. And the kids were playing Atari on that show. I thought to myself, wow, those games were so rudimentary, but kept you glued. It was fun. It was that like tennis or whatever. There's 2 bars on either side banging the ball back and forth. And that was tennis. There's nothing photoreal about it. You'd be happy playing that for hours.
I remember being quite obsessed. Joust. And it was simply, you were like a knight with a lance on top of a bird on the classic Atari. The button was to fly, so it was to move up, and it had gravity, so you were falling down unless you were pressing the button to move up. You were just flying back and forth and trying to lance the other person. It was quite good. Very two-dimensional, very rudimentary. It was fun because it was challenging. What quote from a famous person lives in your mind rent-free?
Nothing I can recall, but Mark Twain's quote about San Francisco, whenever I visit the Bay Area, it always comes to mind. Something about San Francisco being cold in the summer, almost like it's winter, because it's out in the bay, right? It's out in the water, so it's always cold. You don't even feel summer in San Francisco for some reason. I can't roll it off my tongue at this point, but it is always cloudy, rainy, and whatnot. It never feels like in San Francisco, but I'm spoiled. I'm in Southern California, and you peek out of the window, you'll see it's nice, 80 degrees, dry heat, perfect weather.
I was in Palm Springs a couple of months ago and up in the mountains at a buddy of mine's place. And yeah, it's dry, but it really nice. Really good time.
Yeah.
Right. So you've had 4 successful exits. What's the one critical decision pattern that separates CEOs who scale from, say, 10 million to 100 million versus those who plateau? What blind spots do most leaders have at that inflection point?
I think even though I had 4 exits, I'm on to my 5th. There are a number of factors that come into play each time, which is different. It's like you play the game each time, but you cannot repeat your success easily. So there's no formula. A lot of startup success and scaling depends on timing. You can have a very good idea, but you can still not scale because your timing is off. So for instance, we've seen this play out many times in the technology space. So if you look at the Palm Pilot, it was successful, but it never hit the sort of success that the iPhone did. So iPhone hit it out of the park, but Palm Pilot was maybe a generation, a decade too early. Or if you look at Instacart versus Webvan. Webvan was a company during the first internet boom. Same idea as Instacart, almost identical. Came after COVID and 25 years later, and where people had The feeling, you know what, I just want my groceries delivered to me. But webvan failed badly. Instacart has taken off. So like this, there are ideas which come back because the timing is right. To talk about scaling, one has to look at whether your timing is right. Even Zoom, for example, Zoom was out since 2003 and only took off in 2020 because it was like, nah, people used it, didn't use it. And then after COVID, it became the norm of how to meet. Timing is very hard to explain. You sometimes hit that scale when your timing is perfect. People want to use your product. And so that's one aspect of it. Other aspects, I would say, you need to know your customer. So you need the ideal customer profile. You need to know what they want, what makes them tick. And you want to become invaluable to them. You want to be woven into the fabric of their work. Once you become indispensable, then the chances of you staying and scaling is higher. Once you're just a discretionary item, then the chances of being replaced is also higher. And I'm not saying these things are easy by any means. Some of the companies out there, definitely, a few years ago, I might have said, if Google went away, I'd be in trouble. But more and more now, I don't use Google as much. I use some of the AI tools that I can find my way around it. But that would not have been true 2, 3 years ago. Our behaviors and habits and how we use technology also evolves. And so it's a moving target. And so as much as possible, you want to stay within the sort of framework of how users operate and be part of their routine. That's very important, I think, to scale.
I stuck on your Zoom example. Zoom's also built a lot of functionality that I don't think anybody uses. There's quite a bit in there that I think they were probably on a very different idea of what it would take to scale. There's document collaboration, whiteboards, all kinds of things. At least from my own perspective, I'm not sure how many people are even using all of that feature set. I'm sure it shifted for them when Zoom became the de facto. I know they had to add a lot of security features. They were in some bad PR before COVID around security issues. It was probably interesting too, like they didn't even intend for that growth to occur. They probably thought they'd have to add some of these additional features to get the growth. I know many digital businesses felt that way during COVID. All of a sudden, there was a lot of growth brought on by that shift. The trajectory just wasn't in a way that they thought it was going to be. At Synergetics.ai, you're building autonomous agent technologies. How should CEOs think about the ROI timeline of AI implementation, and when does waiting become more expensive than acting?
So right now, what we have seen is the first wave of AI agent technology hit the market. Most of those technologies, in my opinion, are prototypeware. They are not really ready for production, enterprise grade technology. So they are a bit rough on the edges. If I went back to the first internet boom, it is thousands before even Netscape came on board. Very crude things. And I look at the agents because I read the stories about these agents. I just read one yesterday pertinent to one of my customers who we have built agents for addiction counseling, drug, alcohol, gambling addiction, with a company out of Florida. My client sent it to me, and one of these competitors, their agent literally asked participant in the mental health space to go jump off of the cliff. That was a story where it said, okay, go jump off. We're talking about things which lack guardrails and cause a lot of headaches. And a lot of it comes down to a swath of companies have come on board, which I call LLM wrappers. What we mean LLM wrappers is they take an out-of-the-box model and they put a thin veneer on top of it and call it an agent. Those types of technologies are the most risky and dangerous to businesses. But then from our perspective, we have been engineered to be enterprise grade and quality, which is why we have gotten articles written about us in Forbes, MSN, endorsements from MIT Media Lab, and so on, because of how we've gone about building these agents. These agents that we build have various properties which make them unique and more industrial grade technology. First of all, they have an identity. Just like you have a driver's license or a passport, these agents have an ID. That's very important because agents which don't have an ID, their actions cannot be easily traced. And so you want to know which agent did this work for me, when did it run, and what did it do. You want this observability, accountability, and traceability. So for those purposes, an ID is important, and that ID is registered in what we call a registry. It's like a phone book, which says, okay, this agent lives at this address, and it's accessible here. And our agents also carry wallets. These wallets contain not only the ID, similar to you and I carrying our driver's license. Agents can go out and do certain actions on your behalf. So they can shop for you. So they can talk to websites. They can talk to other agents. They can do a number of things. The differentiator or moat that we have built is ID, registry, wallet, communication protocol, and several things, about 6 or 7 things that make it safe, fit for industrial use. And also a lot of the first batch of agents worked as individual contributors. If you look at any organization wanting to use agents, you first have to look at how the human workforce works within these enterprises. Usually you'll have some people who are individual contributors in any company, but a lot of times people work collaboratively. They work collaboratively with one another. Agents should be able to work with other people. They should be able to work with other agents. So that's what we call a multi-agent workflow. And our agents have those properties ingrained in them from the outset. So these are some of the things that CEOs of enterprises have to start thinking about when they bring in agents, to see not only should it be solving a problem, but it should work cohesively with the rest of the organization. Enterprises are evolving from a workforce that is made up of human capital into a workforce that is a hybrid workforce made up of human capital and agents. So they all have to work in a workflow. The enterprises can decide which types of tasks are so mundane or repeatable that can be given to an agent. You utilize your human capital for more value-added tasks instead of drudgery and boring repeatable work that can be done by an agent.
I think I'm hearing in that transformative work you're talking about is the garbage in, garbage out problem. If I give humans a bunch of bad data, they can weed through it or raise the alarm. And I'm sure you can set parameters for your agents in this characterization of the agent. But just what's your take on this? You hear it all the time. You have to have good data, or you have to supply the agents with good data. What role is the data engineering or data availability playing into the successfulness of an agent rollout for you?
So that's a very good question, and I'll answer it in this following way. For any enterprise to adopt AI or AI agents, there are 4 key elements. One is people, second is process, third is tools, and the fourth is data. Data is very important. Data, they say, is the new oil. Without data, you cannot do anything. You need data. The data has to be gleaned from databases or from your customers or from your accounting system or your supply chain system or whatever systems that you use. You have to have good clean data. The cleaner your data, the better stitched it is, the more relevant it is, then that data can be used for training AI models. When I say the word data, a lot of people think databases or Excel or whatnot. It can be in Word, it can be videos, it can be audios, it can be anything. It can be any sort of medium that you have. Can be DVDs, can be anything. All of that information gets transcribed into text usually, and that text is fed into the models. What the models do under the hood, just briefly mentioning it, is the equivalent of how a human brain works, where we have associative memory. So if I tell you the word Rudolph, immediately you might think reindeer, because those words are very commonly used together. But you won't think of basketball with the word Rudolph because it's got no relevance. These closeness of words, these are called vectors. And this is how a computer learns in the AI space. Data is very important, but so are other things. People have to be ready for adoption. There'll be some people who are not ready. They have to be retrained, or you might not have the right personnel. You might need to hire new people and so on. So people aspect is very important. Second is process. Sometimes what we have found is a lot of companies have people working, but when people work, they typically don't put down all of their processes on paper. There's something going around which I have called tribal knowledge. If you go to a company, they will tell you, yeah, this is how we do it over here. This is how we do it over here is not good enough to train an agent, because you need to specifically say do 1, 2, 3, 4. Whereas a human sometimes does certain things without being asked to do so, because they learn things and they keep repeating it. So tribal knowledge has to be surfaced out and put into some sort of learnable, consumable format that can be fed to an agent. So that's the process. The third one is tools. So you cannot go to war these days with sticks and stones. You need drones, the right type of fighter jets, and so on. So you cannot go to war for AI with sticks and stones either. You need updated systems. We have customers who we are dealing with who've got antiquated systems. Sometimes we tell them in a gentle way, maybe you want to think about upgrading those systems. You cannot go from Stone Age to Space Age in one jump. It's some intermediate steps. So we need to update them in certain ways to get the tools up to date before we can start to do AI. The third one is then find the data. All of these four things have to work in concert to bring AI to an organization.
Yeah, we're finding the same. Just recently, we were doing a COBOL migration. So somebody was still running a major business with COBOL, one of our clients. And so in the same conversation, we're talking about migrating. We're also talking about an AI transformation. And it's one thing might need to be done before the other. Like we may just have to serialize these because you need to get into some modern data systems. On the data side that you're talking about, I think CEOs are hearing, okay, you need to have the data. They know where the data currently lives, but you're actually describing a process of taking that data and bringing it into view of the model where it's contextualizing that data. You did a really good job explaining that. I find that conversation's difficult for a lot of CEOs to understand, that you may have the data, but what we're going to do is migrate that data into a place where the AI can leverage it, understand it, and it can be useful in your business process. That's an engineered process that needs to be properly done.
Correct. And if you do it well, the results you get as output from the AI systems tend to be good. When it's not good, people call it hallucination or some terms like that. That's because what has happened is one has to understand. And also some of the business people sometimes think of AI as magic. It's not magic. AI is actually statistics. It variability, that means the range of answers that it can give you. And so what happens is when you train the model, it's like at the bottom of the pyramid, the range of answers could be huge. I can give you apple, pineapple, banana, watermelon. The range is so wide, but when I fine tune, it becomes like the top of the pyramid where the variability is so little that the chances of getting the same answer over and over again is higher. So what happens is then the system looks credible to you. Every time you ask the question, the answer is going to be pretty much the same. Some words here and there, but it's pretty much around the same area. It's not going to see one thing one time and then something completely 180 degrees the other way the other time.
That narrowing process you're talking about tends to fall apart. I create a very flexible system using AI, a very flexible agent, if you will. And then as I start to hit it with different use cases, it's realized I wanted a more narrow solution. So some guardrails are put in place. I've also experienced where the solution gets so narrow for certain use cases that having AI in the mix isn't worth it at all. We go back to traditional programming because the range of answers was so narrow that it was better just to do traditional logic, and the need for those answers to be precise was greater. And that doesn't mean all the use cases needed to be programmed traditionally, but that there were certain things that the users were asking of the agent that were just very finite.
Actually, what you touched upon is an important topic, which is large language models versus small language models. In certain use cases, you can get away with small language models because if you have a particular intended purpose for that system, you don't need to train it on all the world's knowledge because the large language models are encyclopedic in nature. They have a lot of tokens. They know everything from Genghis Khan invaded China to LA Lakers won N number of NBA titles. They know all that. But let's say that you're going to use it for a specific use case in a specific type of business. Let's say it's an automotive repair shop or something like that. I'm making up one on the fly. So now car make, models, trims, the different parts and fitment of automotives can get by in your LLM when you ask it how to fix a particular model of car or what's wrong with it when you hear a particular noise. So you can now have a small language model, which is very targeted, which can solve your problem as opposed to something which has got such broad knowledge. The example I give is the word with the LLM, which can go wrong, is the word claim. So let's say the word claim in insurance, it means it's an insurance claim. That means something went wrong in the policy. I'm filing a claim to get refunded.
I can claim something, but I can also file a claim. It's announced.
Exactly. And if I use the word claim in mining, it means a piece of land that someone has mining rights over. You can go mine for gold or whatever it is, and that's a claim too. But if you give it to a large language model and you put the word claim and it doesn't understand the context, it's going to give you some spurious results because it doesn't understand what are you talking about mining, are you talking about insurance, or what are you talking about, and becomes a bit confused. But if you use small language models which are specific for that particular intended purpose, then you're most likely to get better results. The cost of operations will be lower because you can run it on a smaller footprint machine and be able to still operate. So a lot of benefits. But again, these are things that come with experience, and you have to look at it on a case by case basis. Optimize your AI for
Yeah,
your
but
organization.
definitely. I think one of the early stories is legal space. Needed to actually use real case law and be working off a small language model, but some poor lawyer went and did his argument off of ChatGPT and ended up hallucinating case law and got disbarred over it. Like it was not the right tool for the job. Having raised $6 million and sold net profitably, walk us through the key financial metrics and operational decisions that you made that exit attractive to acquirers versus companies that struggle to find buyers.
That was a particular period in time. We raised the funding during COVID, and it was a very tough time because liquidity had disappeared in the market. Ultimately, when we sold with the help of our investors who found a buyer who wanted to utilize some of the technologies that we had developed for their enterprise in Web3, which is more blockchain oriented because we had certain blockchain components. Each exit that I've done really depends on what the acquirer is trying to do. Sometimes I've sold companies where they want to do an acqui-hire. Sometimes they have bought it for the IP of the company. The company I had started, I sold it to a larger company, and that company got rolled up. And the acquirer, in case of a public company, and they acquired us simply because we started to encroach on their customer base. We were in the wireless space and we were encroaching on this wireless area that they had already covered, and we were starting to move into their territory, and they found us a threat. So they bought us to still have the hold over that domain. So people acquire companies for all sorts of reasons. I've read about people acquiring companies to just shut it down. So there's a lot of reasons. Sometimes people want, I have acquired a company before, not for revenues, but actually for acqui-hire to get talent. Sometimes you want to grow into a territory, you acquire for that reason, maybe because you don't have that. Maybe you're on the West Coast, you want to get East Coast, and you don't want to go there and set up shop. You just acquire someone to expand your network quickly. A lot of times it's driven by time to market and the window of opportunity. You don't want to waste time. And that's what's happening in the AI space as well currently, because a lot of startups and larger players have a choice. Do I go back and spend a lot of R&D dollars and build the stuff from scratch? Or do I just buy up some smaller companies and get going here? So that's also happening currently as there's some consolidation in the space.
You're seeing the AI blockchain convergence. For traditional businesses in our audience, what's the 18-month window where competitive moats either get built or destroyed by AI? And how do they audit their vulnerability?
So I'll just touch on AI and blockchain first. These two are on a collision course. AI can be used within the enterprise. That's the use case currently playing out in most companies. Soon, companies will also discover that AI has to be used outside their company with their partners. If you're a larger company, your auditor is an external entity. So you need to be able to communicate. Your agents need to communicate with the auditor's agent. So that's a cross enterprise communication. For those types of use cases, blockchain is very good because you can do what we call decentralized IDs. Both sets of agents don't trust each other, but you need to trust something. And that something happens to be blockchain. The IDs of all the agents, you can look it up. You can authenticate the provenance of the agent to make sure that this is really from company A and this is really from company B. And so we can trust and communicate. Blockchain happens to be this sort of hidden hand overarching across all enterprises that everyone can trust, which is why it's now becoming mainstream and people are moving a lot of money through blockchain. People are using blockchain for a lot of reasons. What is the second part of your question?
What's the 18-month window here? How worried do I need to be? First off, just to respond to your point about blockchain, I think the concept of smart contracts is severely neglected. We saw that happen in the crypto space. Everybody understands these smart contracts, but smart contracts are, if these certain things are true, then transact in this certain way. I love your example of the auditing. when the job is done or when evidence of the job getting done happens. I own a software development firm. If all of a sudden we were being paid on the story point or on the Git check-in, there would be something really cool about that because the customer's getting velocity, and then there's some money in escrow somewhere managed by the smart contract. As we move forward into the velocity, the transactions are happening. Seems really smart. So I'm understanding that. And then you helped with that idea of the two AIs working together that don't trust each other. We can put a smart contract in place and define what needs to be true before the audit is complete, the transaction needs to happen. While it feels like that's a long ways away in terms of us shifting from legalese, right, which now we have to hire a lawyer, to switching to smart contracts to do commerce. Once that happens, I would imagine that there's going to be a pretty rapid transition. Like if we get over some certain initial hump, the 18-month window where competitive moats either get built or destroyed by AI.
I would think that it depends. So you're saying that existing companies with AI, someone can come in and take over their mode. So it depends on how. So that's a very general question. So I'll say it this way. If your moat is completely technology based, then the ability for AI to destroy your moat is higher. If your moat is a combination of relationships, industry know-how, domain knowledge, and things like that, which humans are better at, then AI being able to destroy that is lower. So it depends on what space you're in, a mechanical or technological moat, which is programmatic. It can be overcome, I think. That's the danger. I'll give you a simple example. Even Google is a good example. So Google, the moat was what? That index all the pages, and they had a search box, and you type in something and they can find you the links where they found those things out. Their crawlers found those things. Now it's a pure technological mode. You don't talk to anyone at Google. There's no relationship with Google. You are just having a relationship with the user interface and so on. So now out comes all these AI companies using other tools like ChatGPT, works off a foundational model and provides the answers directly. You don't need to click on 10 different links to find the answer. They are able to overcome the Google moat by the virtue of the fact that there's no relationship building, there's nothing. It's just a different technology that people find more compelling. If you take a different type of business where most of your value proposition is embedded in technology, relationships, people skills, customer service, and other things, softer things, then I think AI just coming in, just wiping that clean, the chances are a little bit less. I'm not saying it won't be done, but I think it's a less.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And I would say even the more relational your business is, it's going to delay that to some extent. I feel like
on trust and other factors.
You've taught at Wharton, MIT, Stanford. What emerging technology concepts are most business leaders missing that will reshape their industries in the next 3 to 5 years?
I think a combination of things. Like a few years ago, I started to talk about IoT, AI, and blockchain being just a continuum. At that time, a lot of people looked at me oddly because they looked at IoT as one thing, they looked at AI as a separate thing, and they looked at blockchain as a separate thing. So if you bring it together, I'll tell you, IoT is similar to your limbs of your body, your legs, your arms, your perception, the ability to see, touch, and feel, and so on. So IoT is like that. Now, if you look at AI, AI is like your thinking part of your brain, which can compute, take those perceptions from the IoT and start to react to it. Blockchain is almost like your memory. It's like it's got a running memory of what's going on and so on. It has a ledger, like a large database of running facts that you can use to impact your brain and so on. So all these three things work in concert. If I were to draw parallels between IoT and blockchain to the human body, that's how I would draw it. So now I think for business leaders wanting to utilize technology effectively, they need to understand at least the fundamentals of all these technologies and reimagine their companies. How do I do my work in a possibly radically different way? Because that might make you get a force multiplier by combining different technologies together to be able to reshape your business by 10x, let's say. You might need only a tenth of the people, or you might be able to produce 10 times as much, or you might be able to lower your costs significantly to get competitive advantage. If you can utilize technologies like Lego blocks, if you can get the right mix, you can really make something great happen. A lot of people look at them as individual things without looking at it holistically is all I'm saying. So you start putting it all together, then you start to think, wow, this can be really useful. So the example, I really care about AI, blockchain, and IoT because I really believe, honestly, soon you're going to see these robots, right? These physical robots like Optimus and so on from Tesla. What are those? Those are IoT. They're IoT devices, which happen to have a brain that you can now communicate with. And most likely these IoT devices would be registered on chain. They'll be on blockchain because you're not going to have a proprietary databases for each and every physical bot out there. So you're probably going to rely on a public chain where anyone can use it and the cost is low. So very likely that you're going to see these three technologies converge, and that's going to happen.
Yeah, the small to medium-sized business context, it's almost like a race to zero because I know there's agencies emerging where they're like a 70-25, where 5 years ago, if you were an agency and you had a 25% gross margin, you were doing pretty good. Now we're going to have agencies that are like a 75% margin, 25% cost of goods sold. But at the same time, like if one agency can do that, then another one can too. And so in some way, it's going to be like highly disruptive where that differentiator won't come the work execution, but the expertise and the relationships, like you were saying earlier. I like where you brought that too, where it's thinking differently about how the business might be operated and run, and then really what is the true differentiator.
Right. I think we'll see a lot of new classes of tools come about. So right now, for certain tasks, even during the office, we might use Word for something, Excel for another, and PowerPoint for a third. We have surrounded ourselves with about 10 or 12 different SaaS types of tools. I think we'll start to see smarter pieces of software which operate completely on a different paradigm. And I think we'll start to see a lot of those types of things come about.
So you sit on multiple boards now. What's the most common strategic mistake CEOs make when presenting to boards during high growth phases? How should they be framing discussions differently?
I think when you're on a board inform, the CEOs can leverage the board in a couple of ways. One is the board's purpose is to have oversight over a company and to make sure that nothing wrong is going on, especially if it's a public company. Then the board really plays an important role in order to keep the management honest, right? So if the management does something irregular or something like that, the board is supposed to keep them in line. That's the role. But at the same time, I think the board shouldn't be just policing. It can be a group of people to help the CEO like open doors to also look at areas where the CEO may not have expertise. It's almost like a group of really smart advisors who can help in strategic directions of the company. There are certain public companies, and we've seen this happen many times. If you looked at BlackBerry, at one point in 2004 or 2006 or something like that, nobody would have told you that BlackBerry would go out of business within a certain period of time. Or same thing if you reversed 10 years earlier, nobody would have said that Blockbuster would have gone bye-bye, or Xerox or Kodak or something like that. So in those cases, I sometimes wonder what really happened. Was the management not communicating with the board? Was the board not telling the management, hey, you know what, you're off the rails here, you have to get back on track? The board has this role to play to not just watch passively if something falls off the rails, to bring them back. Even Intel, for example, look at Intel. So Intel this big and NVIDIA this small, and now NVIDIA is this big and Intel is small. That happened within the last 15, 20 years, the role reversal. But what were they doing? Sleep at the wheel? I don't know. I'm looking at it from management, board, strategy and culture. What really happened to let someone else come in and completely wipe you out? So
Yeah, no, and just to go along with that, I think in the board management process, McKinsey Horizon planning, Horizon 2, I'm sure Intel's trying to figure out what do they do with their current business, right? And Horizon 1, so what do I need to be addressing in my current business, operational issues, that kind of thing. Horizon 2 is that next phase of thing. And you even have, I'm sure in the middle of their Horizon 2 strategy, Apple goes and starts building their own silicon. But then there's this Horizon 3 that's often neglected. There's incorrect assumptions in there. Intel, just as an example, tried to do some innovative things, but took some wrong guesses. And so when I'm doing a CTO advisory or fractional CTO work, I'm really drawing what is that Horizon 3? What's the thing that keeps you ahead? It almost feels like NVIDIA had a really correct horizon matrix. You even see them addressing processing for robotics right now. They're making a big bet on robotics. I wonder, just for super practical advice, if it's simply articulating the three horizons to the board and asking them for their feedback and what they think. I have to believe that if Blockbuster did that, their Horizon 3 would be clear enough that they could start digitizing in advance of Netflix and in advance of some of the other streaming services. But when you get so obsessed with the present that you don't plan for Horizon 3 or set budget.
Kodak had digital photography in 1971. They did not do what Netflix did. Netflix has a saying, CEO mentioned in one of his press releases, they disrupt themselves. Kodak didn't disrupt itself. What it did was it tried to preserve its supply chain, all the photo processing people at their Walgreens or Rite Aid. They had a whole ecosystem of people who would pick up the film, process it, kept all of that alive. When all of that would go away, if you went to digital photography where customers would take the photo, plug it into the FBC and upload. So they wanted to preserve the ecosystem as opposed to preserving themselves. The ecosystem killed the company. That's what happened.
Yeah.
So see, like what you said, further out vision of Horizon 3, to see, oh, this is what might happen. I have to have some self-preservation capabilities instead of worrying about ecosystem, which we see in certain other businesses as well today. This is the problem. Sometimes you become a captive, a prisoner of your own success and your own ecosystem that you've created that you cannot break out of it. That's what Netflix tried to do. They said, I'm not going to ship DVDs anymore. I'm going to just stream. And that's it. If you have DVDs, sorry, we are not in that business anymore. So you disrupt yourself. Because if you keep plugging money into what you thought was success, it might have been successful this year, last year, but next year it's going to be a major failure because consumers shift very quickly. And as businesses, you need to plan 1-2 years ahead. And that's what happens even in our startup, right? Like when I started to build these agents, started building in 2023. So in 2023, when I was talking about agents, a lot of people that I went to, they started looking at me and looking out the window to see where my spaceship was. Because like, did you land from Mars or what are you talking about?
Right.
And then I'd say, well, this is what's going to happen next. And then slowly, many of the things that we have prognosticated have started to unfold one by one. And one more I'll just give for your audience today. One of the things that we have built, which other people will start talking about soon, is called agent virtual machine. So we have something called agent virtual machine, similar to Java virtual machine or Ethereum virtual machine. The fact that agents will be deployed in anything and everything. So you need to have an ecosystem or like a kind of a container in which the agent can operate very easily across different platforms. I'll be very proud of it because that's needed in order to not only operate the agent, monetize the agent, track the agent, know what it's doing, observe it, things like that. But you see, what happens is if you don't imagine the future, you cannot build it when people start to come to the realization, oh, we need this. You cannot start building it then. You gotta
Be too late. Yeah, I love that. I think that's a great takeaway is that you have the right Horizon 3 when it's self-disruptive, when it's going to fundamentally shift not just the marketplace, but your own involvement in it. I think that's a great lesson learned. I appreciate the time with you. I want to be conscious of your time. And if people like what you've had to share today, how would you like them to connect with you?
just email me at Synergetics or Ragu at Synergetics.ai. Or you can look me up on LinkedIn, Raghu Bala.
Who specifically are you most interested in speaking to? What conversations are you enjoying having these days?
From our vantage point right now, we'd like to talk to investors, enterprises wanting to make a bet on AI and undertake a digital transformation or AI transformation journey. We'd like to advise, help them make that transition. So we like to talk to potential customers or partners. And then sometimes we talk to other software companies where we can partner to, after certain opportunities together.
Awesome. Thank you again for your time. I think it's been super insightful, and I really appreciate you being on the podcast today.
Thank you so much.